Welcome to the Creative Commons RX podcast. Before diving into this episode, I want to ensure we're all on the same page. This is for general informational purposes only and does not constitute the practice of medicine, nursing, or other professional healthcare services, including the giving of medical advice. No doctor-patient or pharmacist-patient relationship is formed. Using this information and the materials linked to this podcast is at the user's risk. The content on this podcast is not intended to substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Users should not disregard or delay in obtaining medical advice from any medical condition they have, and they should seek the assistance of their healthcare professionals for any such conditions. Clinical experts created the references, content, and clinical insight. NotebookLM, a Google AI tool, created the audio content, which I extensively reviewed before release. Finally, the host states that he takes all conflicts of interest seriously. Currently, there are no conflicts to disclose. For all of his disclosures and the companies he invests in or advises, he directs users to reach out independently, where he keeps an up-to-date and active list of all disclosures.
Okay, so what do cocaine, an asthma inhaler, and a decongestant all have in common? I know, it sounds like the start of a really weird joke, right? But the answer is actually a fascinating and sometimes really dangerous class of substances that basically put our bodies into overdrive. And understanding them is the key to, well, everything from your morning coffee to a life-threatening overdose.
So today, in this Toxicology Explainer, we are diving deep into sympathomimetics and amphetamines. These are the substances that tie that whole random list together, and we're going to break down exactly how they work and why they matter so much.
Here's the plan. First, we'll nail down the basics. Then we'll look at what happens when these things push the body to its absolute breaking point. After that, we'll step into the shoes of a doctor trying to solve a really tricky clinical puzzle. We'll put a spotlight on the notorious amphetamine family. And finally, we'll see how the pros handle a life-or-death overdose situation.
All right, so first things first, what in the world are we actually talking about when we say sympathomimetics?
A sympathetomimetic is basically any substance that mimics your body's fight or flight response. You know, it's like a chemical shortcut to your survival instincts. It gets your heart racing, your blood pressure skyrockets, your pupils get huge. It just floods you with this massive jolt of energy. And what's wild is that they are literally everywhere, from powerful illegal drugs like cocaine to prescription inhalers, the decongestant you grab at the pharmacy, and yeah, even your morning cup of coffee.
Now look, a little fight-or-flight boost can be useful, but in an overdose, it's like putting a brick on the accelerator of your body's most critical systems and just letting it rip. So let's look at the terrifying chain reaction that happens when things get pushed way past the breaking point.
First up, the heart is under an insane amount of pressure. It's beating incredibly fast, which means it's screaming for more oxygen. But at the exact same time, the blood vessels are being squeezed tight. This can lead to something called coronary ischemia, where the heart muscle is literally starved of blood. Cocaine is an absolute master at this. It's a powerful vasoconstrictor, which means it cranks up the pressure while squeezing the pipe shut. It's just a perfect recipe for a heart attack.
Meanwhile, the brain is on fire. Just think of sympathomimetics as flooring the gas pedal on your central nervous system. This complete flood of stimulation leads to hyperthermia, a super dangerous high body temperature. The whole system gets so overloaded, it can trigger seizures, intense agitation, and even psychosis.
And that chain reaction just keeps going, making its way down to the kidneys. All that extreme hyperactivity and overheating causes muscle tissue to literally break down. That's a condition called rhabdomyolysis. This floods your bloodstream with proteins that act like sludge, and they just clog up the kidney's delicate filtering system, causing severe acute injury.
Okay, so imagine you're a clinician in an emergency room. This situation presents a huge puzzle. A patient comes in with all these symptoms, but there are several other life-threatening conditions that look almost identical. And this is where the real detective work kicks in, because the clues are so subtle. Just look at the difference between a sympathomimetic overdose and an anticholinergic one. The key? It's sweat. A sympathomimetic patient is usually sweating like crazy, while an anticholinergic patient is totally dry. Even their agitation is different. One is restless, can't stop moving, while the other is agitated in a more, well, non-focused way. Getting this diagnosis right is everything. It can be the difference between life and death.
All right, let's narrow our focus a bit and zoom in on one of the most well-known and notorious classes of sympathomimetics, the amphetamines.
The history here is just wild. Amphetamine's journey starts back in 1932 as a simple nasal decongestant. Fast forward a decade, and it's being given to soldiers in World War II to fight off fatigue. By the 1970s, its abuse potential was so obvious, it became a tightly controlled substance.
But that didn't stop it. The 80s and beyond saw this massive resurgence with the arrival of designer drugs like MDMA and high-purity meth or ice. So what is the difference between regular amphetamine and its infamous cousin, methamphetamine? You know, it all comes down to one tiny molecular tweak, an extra methyl group. That's it. But that small addition makes methamphetamine more fat-soluble, which lets it just storm the blood-brain barrier way faster. It also makes it harder for the body to break down, so its effects last a lot longer. The result of that one tiny change? A faster, stronger, and way more addictive drug.
But the chemical evolution didn't stop there. Oh no. Today, we're seeing a whole new generation of synthetic drugs that are just dangerously potent, like the NBOMs.
So what makes these things so incredibly deadly? Well, it's a perfect storm. First, they are potent in micrograms. We're talking a dose the size of a few grains of salt can be lethal. Second, their effects are often delayed, which can trick a user into taking more before the first dose even kicks in, and that can cause a catastrophic overdose. And finally, to top it all off, they're often disguised and sold as other drugs like LSD, so the person taking it has no earthly idea what kind of danger they're actually in. So, with a patient in crisis from any of these substances, how do medical professionals even begin to fight back? The response has to be incredibly fast and precise. The first steps are absolutely critical. You got to assess vitals, especially that core body temperature. That hyperthermia we talked about is a killer, so immediate external cooling is essential. At the same time, the team is working to control the extreme agitation and get IV access so they can start administering life-saving medications.
Now, the go-to treatment is a class of drugs called benzodiazepines. They basically act as a brake on that overwhelmed central nervous system, calming the agitation, the seizures, and that racing heart. But there is one giant flashing red line that you can never, ever cross. You never give a beta blocker by itself. Think of it this way. The beta blocker calms the heart, but it does absolutely nothing to release those clamped down blood vessels. This creates a state of unopposed alpha stimulation. It's like closing the only pressure release valve on a system that's about to explode. It can be completely catastrophic. So we end with this thought. A single extra methyl group can turn a medicine into a menace. A substance designed to open up airways can also be the thing that stalks a heart. It really makes you think, doesn't it, about the incredibly fine line that separates a therapeutic effect from a toxic one.
This is for general informational purposes only and does not constitute the practice of medicine, nursing, or other professional healthcare services, including the giving of medical advice. No doctor-patient or pharmacist-patient relationship is formed. Using this information and the materials linked to this podcast is at the user's risk. The content on this podcast is not intended to substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Users should not disregard or delay in obtaining medical advice from any medical condition they have, and they should seek the assistance of their healthcare professionals for any such conditions. Clinical experts created the references, content, and clinical insight. NotebookLM, a Google AI tool, created the audio content, which I extensively reviewed before release. Finally, the host states that he takes all conflicts of interest seriously. Currently, there are no conflicts to disclose. For all of his disclosures and the companies he invests in or advises, he directs users to reach out independently, where he keeps an up-to-date and active list of all disclosures.